My family was dining in a fancy restaurant when Eric, my husband, took over the reservation I had made for Dad's birthday celebration. He brought his in-laws along and said, "A single father like yours doesn't belong in fancy restaurants. Stick to cheap pubs." Despite my frustration, I decided to set Eric straight. "You realize this is my brother's place, right?" I said. "I'm Elizabeth, a 27-year-old office worker. My parents divorced when I was little, and Dad raised me. They split because Dad was always working and rarely home, which wore Mom down. Although Dad still loved Mom and didn't want the divorce, he eventually agreed when she said, 'I'm tired of waiting. Set me free.' After they divorced, I stayed with Dad because of financial reasons. He would always say, 'It's not Mom's fault. It's my fault for relying on her too much and neglecting her.' I regret making her feel lonely. When I asked why Mom left, he would sigh sadly. Despite the divorce, Dad always put me first. He made it to my school events and never missed a birthday or Christmas." Some people made insensitive remarks about our single-parent household, but Dad's love made me ignore them. After the divorce, I occasionally saw Mom, but our relationship grew distant after she remarried and had another child. Once I started working, Dad retired early to enjoy a quieter life. He had worked hard to support me, and I wanted him to pursue his interests now. Although I live alone, I frequently visit Dad. 2 years ago, I married Eric, who was introduced to me by a friend. Eric is hardworking and honest, and he quickly earned Dad's approval. His in-laws were also kind and accepted me immediately. However, the suggestion to move into Eric's family home brought me considerable distress. Both my parents are getting older, and I worry about them. They are both retired and hardly go out or talk to anyone these days. Moving in together seems like a good opportunity. Please consider it, Eric pleaded earnestly. Of course, I wanted to respond to his desperate request, but moving into his parents' house would put a significant distance between me and my dad, making it hard to check on him as often as I used to. Dad is healthy, but if something happened, he might not be found in time. I was torn about what to do, but eventually Dad gave me his advice. "I'm healthy enough to live on my own. I don't want to burden you, and you should take care of Eric's family. Call me if anything happens," emphasized to Dad, and reluctantly agreed to move in. However, just a few weeks after moving in, I began to regret my decision. Eric and his parents, whom I thought were kind, drastically changed their behavior towards me. They started treating me like a servant, leaving all the household chores, cooking, laundry, and cleaning, solely to me while Eric and his parents did nothing. I asked Eric to help. "I'm tired from work too. Housework is a wife's job, right?" he retorted. My protest that I also work fell on deaf ears. "It's different. You married me, so you should be devoted to me and my parents," Eric would dismissively say. Coming home tired from work only to face an endless list of chores was overwhelming. Not just the chores, but Eric's mother, Mary, relentlessly tormented me. She'd purposefully spill food to dirty the floor or complain about the slightest speck of dust. "This spot is dirty. Clean it," she would order, leaving dirty clothes all over for me to pick up. After I washed and carefully folded them, she'd say, "These folds will crease the clothes. Do it again," and kick them apart. Moreover, Mary often made disparaging remarks about me being from a single-father household. "You can't even do housework properly because you weren't raised in a proper family. How pitiful. It's amazing you can hold a job. The company must be blind to hire such a bottom-rung woman. It's your dad's fault for the way he brought you up." I was against marrying someone from such a family, but Eric insisted. "I deeply disapprove. You should be more devoted to us and Eric. If we hadn't welcomed you as a wife, you'd be living a sad, lonely life with your dad." Hearing such insults about Dad, I had to suppress the urge to hit Mary. The worst part was that John, my father-in-law, and Eric did nothing to intervene while they witnessed Mary's treatment of me. Far from supporting me, John looked at me scornfully while Eric joined Mary in mocking me. "Mom's right. You lack any gratitude towards us. That's why she's cold to you," Eric sneered. "A woman from a dysfunctional family like yours would have been left on the shelf if I hadn't married you. You barely have any merits besides working and doing housework, so do them well. Don't even think of asking to share the chores. It's your role as a wife, and making excuses like being tired from work is absolutely unacceptable." "I won't allow it," Eric dictated. When I tried to argue or refuse, Eric's mood turned visibly sour. He began treating me as if I were invisible. "How dare you, as a wife, make a fool of me?" he would shout. Mary chimed in. "Don't stress Eric when he's tired, making things worse for me." Some of the furniture in the in-laws' house was bought with my money. I was coerced into purchasing them. They abruptly took me to an electronics store and forced me to buy things, capitulating under public pressure to avoid a scene. The harassment didn't end there. Even when I tried to visit my family for Christmas, they obstructed me. "You're our wife now. Focus on our preparations. We need a feast and thorough cleaning done. Your dad's all alone. He won't do much, right? We have other relatives to entertain," they said. When I persisted on going home, they responded childishly by spilling juice on my packed clothes and hiding my shoes. Facing daily complaints and harassment, I reluctantly gave up the idea of going back home. Unable to reveal the truth, I told Dad, "The in-laws' house is busy with Christmas preparations, so I'll stay and help. Sorry, I can't make it back." Dad didn't blame me. "Then it can't be helped," he gracefully accepted. "Don't worry about it. It's busier there with more people. I can manage fine alone here," he comforted me. Eric's ongoing tyranny made me seriously contemplate divorce, but I was troubled about how to tell Dad, who was purely happy about my marriage, without hurting him. In the second year of this tumultuous marriage, Dad turned 60. I secretly made reservations at a renowned fancy restaurant for his celebration. Anticipating complaints from Eric and his parents, I simply told them I had to return home briefly. They grumbled but reluctantly accepted when I promised it would just be for the day. Upon learning about the restaurant reservation, Dad was immensely delighted. "I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful daughter." "Thank you so much," he said. Hearing Dad express gratitude made me incredibly happy, but I never imagined what would unfold next. As we entered the restaurant and informed the staff of our reservation, we were met with a shocking revelation. "A reservation for two? There are 3 people claiming to be relatives already seated there." Confused, I went to see the reserved table, only to find Eric and the in-laws seated there. Eric, noticing me, sneered with a smug smile. "Too bad you can't outsmart us and dine fancy just by yourselves," he said. The in-laws didn't even look our way, indulging in the feast they had presumably ordered for themselves. Dad, seeing Eric and the in-laws, looked back and forth between us, clearly bewildered. He had only seen the pleasant side of Eric and the in-laws. His confusion was understandable. Eric, suspecting something from my cheerful demeanor about returning home, had sneakily snooped through my mobile phone. He learned about the 60th birthday celebration at the upscale restaurant and made it their first to preemptively order dishes. Eric began to mock us with a triumphant expression. "People from poor single-father households like you don't belong in fancy restaurants. Know your place. Let us savor the dishes here. Be grateful we're allowing you this much. You lot should go to some cheap pub," he said loudly, drawing annoyed glances from other customers. He remained oblivious, soaked in a sense of superiority. Dad, next to me, was dumbfounded by Eric's audacity. I was at my wits' end. I knew Eric and his family were selfish, but I never expected them to stoop to such shameless levels. My anger peaked as they ruined Dad's special 60th celebration. Suppressing my urge to shout, I calmly delivered a fact to Eric as he sat there smugly. This is my brother's place. He invited us here to celebrate Dad's birthday. At my words, Eric and the in-laws, who had been disinterestedly eating, froze. My brother, who had been listening to the entire conversation from the back of the restaurant, appeared with an extremely displeased look. He was taken by Mom during the divorce, but unlike our estranged mom, he has maintained and cherished his relationship with Dad and me. My brother owns the restaurant and was the one who suggested celebrating Dad's 60th birthday here. He hadn't attended the wedding due to work, but had seen the photos, so he had recognized Eric. He initially thought Eric and the in-laws joining at the reserved table were part of celebrating with Dad. Seeing Eric mocking me and Dad, and the in-laws not correcting him, my brother was furious. How dare you speak to my sister and Dad like that? I regret being considerate just because you're Emily's family. Is this how you always treat her? I prepared the seat for my sister's wish to celebrate Dad, not for people who hijack it just to freeload a meal. We will celebrate Dad and my sister's occasion on another day. You'll be paying for what you ate, he declared. Eric and his party started making excuses. No, that's not it. We were really meant to celebrate, but my brother left them to the staff and to me and Dad outside. I'm sorry for letting such people into the restaurant and ruining the celebration. I'll make it up to you. He apologized to us. On the way home, I explained to Dad all the mistreatment from Eric and the in-laws. After listening silently, Dad said, if you're unhappy in your marriage, there's no point. Don't worry about me. Come back home. So I didn't return to the in-laws' house, but went straight to my own home. Shortly after, my brother called to inform me about Eric and the in-laws. They had caused a scene over the bill, but reluctantly paid when threatened with police involvement. Minutes later, Eric called. Where are you? You've embarrassed us. Send the money we paid, he yelled. I will pay a penny. I'm done with you, and we will be divorcing. I've gathered evidence of the bullying, so be prepared, I firmly replied. I had been collecting evidence of the harassment from Eric and the in-laws, which they never suspected. According to a lawyer I consulted, the forced purchases and other financial exploitations were enough to prove psychological abuse. Realizing I was serious about divorce, Eric panicked. No one but me would marry a woman from a single-father household. Do you want to upset Dad? He threatened. I scoffed. Dad said my happiness matters most. I'd rather be with him than care for the likes of you, I replied. Still, Eric warned, you'll regret this. Think it over. But I hung up and proceeded with the divorce preparations. Eventually, Eric and I divorced. He was reluctant due to societal image, but finally gave in as we neared court. I secured substantial evidence of psychological abuse, which ensured I received a fair settlement in the divorce. Additionally, during the property distribution, I made sure to protect my assets and secure my future. I took the furniture I had purchased for the in-laws' house, having the legal right as the buyer. The in-laws tried to complain, but my lawyer simply stated that the purchaser naturally has the right of possession, leaving them defeated. A few months after returning to my parents' home, Eric reached out, wanting to reconcile. Apparently, on the day that triggered our divorce at the restaurant, Eric's boss and colleagues were there for a work celebration. They heard everything he said to me and Dad. Eric's boss, who had struggled growing up in a single-parent home, was disappointed in Eric's disparaging remarks about single-father households. Eric, who was a promising employee, lost his standing and any chance of advancement. Moreover, his colleagues had spread the story, and he was now regarded with contempt at work as a psychological abuser. Eric's problems didn't stop at the company. The in-laws' house became chaotic too. Before our divorce, Eric and the in-laws had offloaded all household chores on me. After the divorce, entrenched in laziness, they bickered over who should do the chores. Eric was being pressured by the in-laws to buy new furniture to replace what I took and to contribute more financially. I was wrong, Elizabeth. I took advantage of your kindness too much. I've truly reflected and want to start over. Eric pleaded for reconciliation, but my feelings had cooled significantly. He likely faced more pressure to do chores at the in-laws' house and wanted me back to resume my role as a housekeeper. Perhaps he was also trying to offload some of the financial demands from the in-laws onto me. So I firmly rejected his proposal. No way. I wouldn't get back with you even if you paid me. I can see you changing back and exploiting me again once we're married. I was foolish not to divorce you sooner without worrying about Dad. Then perhaps Dad's 60th wouldn't have been ruined. We're divorced now, strangers. If you contact me again, I'll consult my lawyer, I said and hung up the phone. Perhaps my mention of a lawyer resonated because I received no further reconciliation attempts from Eric. Now, I'm living happily at home with Dad, and my brother occasionally visits, bringing gifts. His wife is pregnant, and he seems truly happy. Dad and I are both looking forward to the baby. While I'm not considering marriage anytime soon, if the opportunity arises, I'll be sure to choose more wisely.